Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, our audiences. I can see numbers coming in. We're already at 103. We will give it about 2-3 minutes to allow all our participants to join the call, and we will be starting shortly. But in the interest of time for now is to introduce myself. My name is Aggregate. I will be the moderator of today's session. And for all of you that are on social media, the hashtag for today is #ElevateAg, AG for agriculture. We will be discussing transforming Africa's landscapes and livelihoods. And with me is a panel, an eminent panel that will be walking us through these conversations. Welcome to the second series of our sustainable farming webinars. Again, we'll give it about 2 minutes or so to just get going, and I'm watching the clock. So feel free to introduce yourselves on the chat for our audience. Tell us who you are, where you're coming, where you're joining from, the organization you work for, or the work you do. Great opportunity to also just let the world know who you are and what you contribute in this space. We will be watching the chat closely to recognize the colleagues that are joining online. Okay, so I think our time is up. Allow me to once again welcome you all on our second series of sustainable farming, transforming Africa's landscapes and livelihoods. I am Agi Asimwe-Konde, the Vice President of Program Innovation and Delivery at AGRA. I will be your moderator. For our French-speaking audience, we do have interpretation, so feel free to please choose the French-speaking version on the web call. Otherwise, with me is an eminent panel of experts in the agroecology, ag space that will be speaking to us about why we need to transform Africa's landscapes and livelihoods, but also why this work is very important and critical for the continent to be able to feed itself. As you all know, this is our second version of a 3-part web series, and we are honored to once again welcome an audience that is over 300 people joining us across the globe to discuss this very important and pertinent issue around how Africa and the world can indeed have sustainable farming. Allow me at this point to introduce our keynote speaker, who you know very well from our last time, none other than Dr. Telahun Amedi, our Head of Resilience, Climate and Soil Fertility at AGRA, a seasoned systems agronomist and an expert in natural resource management. He brings with him over 25 years of experience in Eastern and Southern Africa and has been actively engaged in research for development in Africa. Dr. Telahun, welcome to the series. You're on mute, Dr. Telahun, please unmute. You're still on mute.
Sorry, yes.
Great. Now,
Can you hear me now?
Yes. And your presentation is on. If you can put it in presentation mode, we are good to go.
Yes, great. Yes. So thank you very much. This is the second series as indicated by the chair, Madam Chair. And the title I gave to my presentation is Sustainable Farming in Action in the continent. For those of you who didn't participate in the last webinar, just wanted to start with this slide to explain a bit about what AGRA is doing and our vision. We are now finishing AGRA 2.0 and shifting from more of really input-oriented, experiential testing of options to integrated approaches. And we are now transforming into inclusive and transformative agriculture, which is happening in the continent. Yeah. You know, the background of this is going to be, you know, this resilience and adaptation strategy we have in the continent. One, because we have a decreasing water budget in the continent, but also a decreasing carbon and primary productivity, which is really increasing food insecurity in the continent. And this is the approach we follow. One is really, why should we do sustainable farming? As we discussed last time, we do sustainable farming because of low productivity. Even in our target communities, we have, and wherever we apply even inputs, we have low productivity in the systems. And we have also an increasing risk of climate change. We have an increasing population in the continent, which is really embarking more on new lands for forest and wetlands and unproductive lands. But also we, you know, are still struggling to maintain yield gain achieved by the last decades without resource management. We are getting less and less per investment on fertilizers and seeds. But also we have a lot of low-hanging fruits, which are easy to move, which you can take to scale. And all these, you know, can play, you know, at a landscape scale with multiple roles of carbon sequestration, enhancing productivity and profitability. And we have to work at a landscape scale to regreen our landscape. So this is really a consolidated approach. And the key principles I mentioned last time with this sustainable farming framework is that one, sustainable farming is really multifunctional. It has to address environmental concerns, productivity concerns, and profitability concerns. But also it should be semicircular to ensure that, you know, there is an input and output going around. And there is also the need for land restoration and the regreening in the continent, because most of our landscapes are degraded with really decreasing carbon pool, which requires a lot of biomass. We need energy because most of the degradation and deforestation happening in the continent is happening because of deforestation and lack of biomass. I keep saying, you know, we are called Sub-Saharan Africa because of lack of water. So water management, particularly mapping, storing, and efficiently utilizing the water resources is a critical point. We, you know, as every other continent, probably more than other continents, we are also suffering from climate change. So climate services and lack of best practices in terms of climate change adaptation is critical. And all these natural resource management issues cannot be done without collective action. So it's really looking for inclusivity and bringing women and youth into the system. And all these technologies sometimes are in the research system, are not reaching farmers. So really context-basic last mile delivery is important, which is appreciating variability. And all this, I think, has to be supported by functional policies and governance mechanisms. Probably this is the most important slide I just want to talk. For one, you know, the seminar and the webinar last time talked extensively about the narratives of different, you know, systems, be it from the perspective of regenerative agriculture or agroecology or you know, sustainable intensification. So one of the messages which came out very clearly out of this was that we cannot compromise food security, resilience, and sustainability over long term when it comes to Africa. So Africa needs to achieve the three without compromising really food security and poverty alleviation. The second message which came out of that was that African farming systems are diverse and we are prone to multiple risks, have low response capacity, and require unique trajectories. So, we need to adapt and adjust based on the local knowledge, based on the local demands, but also from lessons learned elsewhere in other continents. The third message which came out of that webinar was that we are in a degraded system, food insecure. So food security is a big issue. So there is no scientific evidence suggesting that we need to reject judicious use of external inputs because our systems are not accumulating any nutrient. It has been exposed to nutrient mining for years. So we have to really, depend on local success stories from learnings, but also follow sustainable farming principles. And probably this number 4 is the most important bullet point, whereby participants agreed that we should avoid drawing on ideological clustering because there are so many parallel initiatives and narratives going on in agroecology, in regenerative agriculture, in sustainable intensification. So what we need to focus is on the outcomes, really on the healthy middle ground, which is leading to better and brighter future to African smallholder farmers. And all this cannot be done without capacity building. So we agreed, and I think the panel allowed it, that we need to have a capacity building at research, at extension, at policy, and at agro-dealers level to make sure that these are digitalized, these are available to fit into the local systems. So the objective of today's webinar is to follow up on this webinar 1, where we had really discussions and debates on the science and on the narratives. One is really to share the experiences of really, programs, systems, in terms of operationalization of these narratives. So what are the success stories? What are the showcases that are coming from the development actors, from local institutions, from research and other different actors? The second one is really to identify critical drivers from these learnings. What are the incentives? What are the institutional arrangements required to adopt and promote these sustainable farming approaches in the continent? So my input will be to share with you 2 showcases, which I have worked on with colleagues from my previous institution, ICRSAT. So one case study I want to display is really in restoring degraded lands and livelihoods. This landscape in northern Ethiopia, which was really exposed for extreme land degradation of erosion, loss of biodiversity, loss of soils, but also low productivity, with engagements of communities through soil water conservation, for example, putting structures, putting also efforts in identifying what fits where and capturing water. It was possible to develop a system which really can transform a landscape from degraded landscapes to really rehabilitated systems in only 6 years' time. The learning and the outcome and the impact coming from this, about 8,000 hectares of land, was one really a positive effect on downstream, whereby the irrigable land increased from about 240 hectares to 970 hectares because of upstream management of the landscapes. And the yield has increased from about 1.2 ton per hectare to about 1.9 per hectare. In average crops, for some crops more, for other crops less. But I think most importantly, through the introduction of various crops, forages, the number of crops in the area increased from about 3 to 8. But also the income level coming from the livestock sector, increased because farmers were able to sell their young ships, when they used to require 6 months now, they can say it with 3 months. It's about 70% of the household. The second case study it was really managing dry lands in the pastoral and agricultural systems, which are affected by extreme floods. And these downstream landscapes used to be flooded, washed away, or silted. So you could see the type of crop you could grow or forage in the first year. But with interventions which are really about diverting the flood coming from the highlands and displacing and dispersing into farm level, but also rangelands, it was possible to distribute the water and capture the soil and the nutrient and rehabilitate the system like this. So the work that we have done with GIZ Germany in the Ethiopian lowlands called Afar. And the second year, this is the type of really crop you get. Almost 6-7 tons of maize per hectare, and this type of diversification. So the effect was immediate, the effect was really significant, while it has also a positive effect on the downstream communities in terms of displacing and disorganizing communities. So this is the type of really output you get from this holding of the soil and the water. And this is like 3 months old Napier glass that's coming from this landscape. So and then using models, digital tools, we're able to identify where in these landscapes you could get more water and also use that for irrigation and landscape development. And the success factors for this are, one is really targeting, context-specific capacity building. So really working with farmers, in the classrooms outside to make sure that they understand the systems, they identify the options, but also, demonstrate some of the best practices. And the second one was about really joint planning with communities, including a baseline, but also, identifying site-specific really problems and solving those together with the community and sharing knowledge at a scale. And for all that, the partnership is required and collective action is required. So that collective action helps you to understand the system, but also builds the trust over time in terms of understanding the roles and the responsibilities, but also bringing in the clan leaders who really have a voice and influence to manage the free riders in the country. And I think the other important contribution, driver was really using technologies and practices, particularly understanding the system. So monitoring where is a good soil, where is a bad soil, and in the landscape, and map that and use expert knowledge to make sure that this is used for the right crop or for that forage in the system. So this is my last slide. How do we take it to scale? And this is, one is really understanding the farming system in each target country where these integrated solutions can be employed. Two, really is working with country plans. Countries have climate change adaptation plans, afforestation plans, rehabilitation plans, and aligning with these country plans will make the system to be integrating these new concepts. The third, I think, is a capacity building of country teams to make sure that they have the tools to understand the farms and landscapes, but also bring in linker technologies, including climate smart villages, climate services, along with good extension content and VBS. And all that, of course, requires also critical infrastructure, mainly climate advisory services and early warning systems. Incentives are required, but also supporting NARS to capture the lesson, to document the lesson, to share the lesson, and facilitate a country-to-country exchange will be helpful. Thank you very much. Apologies for a bit of disorganization at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Telahun, for those framing comments. And as well said, you did summarize the key actions that came from the first series. And this conversation that is going to happen this afternoon or this evening, wherever you are, will be to build onto those conversations that the scientific group really brought to the fore. And if I might remind the audience, the last time we were told we need to move from simply focusing on terminology to action, that we need to move from continuously testing new things to scaling what has already been tested. And with that, allow me to introduce our next speaker, who's going to help us take it from ideology or terminology or testing to sharing some real life examples through some of the work that he has been working on. And our next speaker is none other than Dr. Getty Zeleke, who's the Director, Water and Land Resources Center in Ethiopia. He brings quite a wealth of experience, including being a member of the International Resource Panel, as well as a contributing author of the Land and Soils 2 and the Food Systems Report of IRP. So Dr. Zeleke, welcome to the conversation. We will be keen on hearing your experiences on how you implemented some of these concepts, especially around the integrated watershed management. What were the entry points and the challenges alike? And how do we become a continent that gets to contribute, feed itself, but also become resilient and sustainable? Welcome, Dr. Zeleke.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Greetings, everyone from Chile, Addis. I start what are the issues when we talk about sustainable agriculture and transformation in Africa. In the context of Ethiopia, we have this paradox of diverse agroecological and landscape potential on one hand, but also low agriculture productivity and poverty on the other hand. You may ask why, and the answer is the mismanagement of the natural source, poor utilization of improved inputs and technologies, and sustainability of natural source management efforts. And of course, this leads to serious land degradation and vulnerability to extreme weather events. Considering about 80% of the population dependent on subsistence agriculture, land degradation is a major issue. And I think what we did to address this issue is a lesson that I will share. So what I will do is I will very briefly show you in the form of pictures about the general directions. So Ethiopia has a diverse agroecology zone, which you can actually walk in from the cold to a tropical climate in a short time. It allows you to grow whatever plants grown in the globe and animals too. Beautiful landscape with rich biodiversity, but misunderstood, mismanaged. Very rich indigenous agroforestry system, in particular in the southern part of Ethiopia, but not well managed and upscaled. We have huge resource, but poorly utilized. We almost contribute about 85% of the Nile as an example, but we use less than 1% in general, as you can see. We have rich tropical soils, one of the best tropical soils, but again, mismanaged, degraded, and underutilized. We do have productive, extensive productive land, as you can see it. Maybe some of you know our cousin, Injera, but again, it is highly fragmented subsistence holder farming, poor technologies, and of course, poor market linkage and poor integration with proper natural source management. Africa, Ethiopia is the origin of coffee, like many African countries, has also many biodiversities, but we are not benefiting from that. Why? is one, fragmented land use system, poor land management, as you can see, the livestock management, the farming system, the diversity is, as you can see it, highly fragmented, although it is a big flat area with good potential, economic scale is not there. You have huge livestock number, but through free grazing, poor management of livestock. Of course, we depend more on biomass energy, 95%. That also contributes to soil fertility mining and deforestation in general. Uncontrolled landscape transformation, as you can see in this slide, where changes are occurring in a short time. And of course, the unsustainable foreign direct investment. I think this is also a case in many African countries that leads to degradation of our environment, unregulated urban expansion, where land potential is not considered in general, population pressure, and of course, many years of unmodified land management practice in general. And I think the last point I want to show you is a poor misunderstanding of the land degradation and benefit of land management, but also unsustainable institutional setup and poor capacity is a major issue. What are the impact of land degradation? What is the status in Ethiopia? You know, considering that 80% of the population are dependent on subsistence agriculture, this is what's happening in many parts. Valley erosion, highly degraded highland areas, and of course, rivers during the rainy seasons like that. This means topsoil, nutrients, our water, our dams, our hydro power, and lakes like this are silted up, farms, wetlands are silted up, and of course, vulnerability to extreme weather events. At some point, when there is drought, it's dry. When it is rainy, it is flooding, and that affects livelihood in general. Now, what are the lessons I want to share? To address this issue, we established learning watersheds. And it is about sustainable landscape approach, or you can call it integrated watershed management. The first thing we did is respecting the principle of sustainable landscape management or integrated watershed management. This is the principle we developed. We have two intermediate outputs, as you can see on the left side, but ultimately, the purpose is improving environmental quality and ecosystem services, improving livelihoods, and create resilience. You can also achieve that through participatory planning approach, make communities and local authorities owners of the sustainable landscape management, and of course, make natural resource management investments productive and economically attractive. That's how you can achieve sustainability also. What are the key lessons from this approach? We found out soil erosion and siltation downstream reduced, peak runoff and flooding avoided, base flow of streams increased, shallow groundwater was raised, and people were able to use well-based irrigation, plant biomass increased, land productivity improved, livelihoods of communities improved, and resilience achieved. This is achieved. Let me show you some pictures. This is in one of our watershed when we start in January 2012. And this is how it was changed in short time. And one of the failure landscape approach is failing to make conservation structures productive. We did this and we were able to change this into this productive land, which actually enhances productivity and also sustainability. We change conservation structures into cash fund that increases income at household level and also encourages farmer to keep structure sustainable, like this one. And Another very innovative approach is, we call it homestead development within the landscape approach. We convert barren homesteads into productive agroforestry areas, as you can see it, and we were able to change. It brings income at household level, confidence of farmers also built to invest on other parts of the watershed. Like this is one priest. We were able to double the income of that owner only by investing in his homestead, but now he's investing also in his farmland. Now, when we talk about watershed or landscape approach, people only focus on natural resource management, but I think we have to change also the farming system. As you can see, the traditional down picture, but we were able to introduce these small technologies which saves time and energy. On the right side, conservation structure with local variety, conservation structure, we improved variety. You can see how it is possible to change by combining this. And of course, sustainability achieved if you move from free grazing to controlled grazing. And change is possible, I think, through proper integrated watershed management in general. Now, learning from this approach, we are now upscaling the experience on 11,700 hectares on 12 watersheds. And soon I think we are able to upgrade that. Another intervention we have, probably a lesson 2, is we are supporting the government of this agriculture commercialization clusters by introducing a spatial planning approach and to integrate natural resource management so that it can be sustainable and productive. This is a kind of crop rotation model we introduced. Lessons from our learning watershed approach. This is my last slide. Changing productivity of our fragmented and subsistence farming requires integration of sustainable landscape approach with improved technology use, market linkage, and WASH. I think in our new project, we also introduced WASH. Initially, our focus was making water available, but we learned that I think sanitation is also very important. Health is very important for Africa. Making homestead productive within the sustainable landscape approach has multiple advantages in transforming smallholder agriculture, including improved household income, improved household nutrition. That's what we call a sustainable food system. And most importantly, it also empowers women and it builds confidence of the farmer towards sustainable farming on his farms outside the homestead. Last, the landscape approach helps to explore the challenge, causes, and opportunities and design adaptive solutions, key for sustainable transformation. I think this approach can be customized to other parts of Africa, and my center is willing to support this if needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zeleke, for that excellent example. And I'm happy that you are putting yourself on the forefront of championing this across other countries, but also scaling it in Ethiopia as well. And that is indeed a very good layer for us to pick up the next speaker, who is Dr. Mogaka Hezron, who will be now sharing also the lessons from academia to practice to planning, but also how that sits as well into the development economics as well as the climate change challenges that we have. So seasoned scientist and facilitator, he's a resource person in the area of institutional analysis and development. He brings with him a wealth of experience on environmental and natural resource management issues, as well as community development. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mogaka Hezron from the University of Embu to pull these things together from where you're sitting as a nexus between academia and practice. Welcome, Dr. Mogaka.
Thank you so much.
Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet, but we can hear you.
Let me see.
It's coming.
Is it there now?
Yes, it is. If you can correct. Excellent.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity to share with the rest of the global community on the experiences that we have had in the region, that is the Eastern and Central Africa region, in terms of moving forward, the efforts being made in terms of agricultural transformation. And I decided to leave my topic as whether we go the agroecological way, the regenerative agriculture way, sustainable farming way, which way forward for the sub-Saharan Africa. My name is Hezron Mugaka from the University of Embu. I'll take a few minutes just to share with you the experiences that we have had, lessons, and some of the conclusions that we have made. I think out of the experiences that we have had almost for the last 10 years that we have been working in the region is that the biggest challenge we have in sub-Saharan Africa agricultural practices is not necessarily in terms of technologies, but most important on how these technologies and innovations which are already existing can be harnessed so that we meet the rapidly increasing food demands, we respond adequately to varying and changing climatic conditions, and meet the household cash needs. So basically, these are the lessons that we have had across the region, whether you're talking about Kenya, you are talking about Madagascar, you are talking about Eritrea. The biggest challenge we have as scientists and practitioners in this particular area is that how can we harness the existing and the emerging agricultural technologies to scale so that we can meet those three conditions. Basically, there is one lesson that we have learned, that it's very, very difficult to balance this delicate situation, whereby you have got the economy on one hand, which is demanding, which is yearning to grow, whether we are talking at the national level or at the regional level. We also have institutions which govern the management of the economy, as well as we have got the natural capital. And essentially at the natural capital level is where we have the biggest challenge. How do we actually ensure that there is that delicate balance among the three key pillars in terms of transforming the agricultural sector that we have in the region, which is extremely important: the economy, the institutions, and the natural capital. Now, in this sense, what is coming out of the region is that whatever name we may give to any kind of agricultural practice that we have, the expected outcomes of a desirable agricultural system are as follows. The communities that we have worked with, the government that we have worked with, the regional bodies that we have worked with have expressed 5 key major outcomes, which are basically founded on the circular economy. That is, every country in the region will want to have an enhanced national productivity. There is the need, any kind of agricultural approach that boosts the private sector participation, because this is an area which is not fully exploited. An agricultural system that opens up new markets where there are premium prices. We know that in Africa, we mainly sell our products as raw, and the returns to our investment is one of the least in the whole world. We also needed what was coming out from communities. There is the need for provision of very specific incentives for enhancing environmental management, or disincentives to eliminate environmentally harmful subsidies, if there are any. And then, of course, there is the other one on reducing the negative impacts to growth. So any kind of agricultural system that moves towards enhancing these 5 key outcomes is what will be called as desirable. Now, what have we done in the region that in terms of moving towards those 5 desirable outcomes? And the biggest attempt that we have had
is in terms of embracing an integrated agricultural transformation approach, which looks at 5 key areas. One of the most important areas is investment in soil health management. Every community member you talk with, every government state officers you talk with, they will tell you that our soils are deteriorating at a rapid rate. And that is undermining livelihood systems in the region. And what are they recommending? They are recommending if we can have integrated soil fertility management, microdosing of fertilizers, the retention of crop residues, but the soil is the most important element that is being pointed to as having a big influence in terms of our agricultural transformation efforts. The other investment which has been pointed out to be very important is soil water moisture management. All the way from the moment we receive the little water that we have to the point whereby this water is made into active use. We all know that most of the African countries are scarce, face economic water scarcity, but not necessarily physical water scarcity. So what is required in this area as the communities continue speaking out is investments in water harvesting, water management structures, as we have seen from the case of Ethiopia. Another area which has come also very important is in terms of social capital development. This is in terms of networking the community so that they can make the best of the capacity that exists. Number 4, which is rarely used or misused, is the use of weather-based advisories. And this is one aspect that has come out very prominently, that what we do within the African continent is to provide communities with climate information or weather forecasts, but we hardly have weather-based advisories which clearly stipulate the weather forecast and then downscale to the point whereby the farmers are given a basket of technologies and options to use. And number 5 that has also come out very prominently from the communities is that we need to move away from the subsistence farming system to market-oriented production and value addition. Now, I think that is basically what I've talked about. The next one is on is a specific example of an intervention that we have had in Kenya and which has proved to be very successful, which has had 3 specific impacts. 1, ecological impact in terms of transforming the ecological situation of the area. Number 2, it has motivated the policymakers to have specific policies relating to agricultural transformation and water harvesting. Number 3, it has had specific incentives for the communities to invest in land management. So the case we have there was supported by the World Bank, and this is one of the specific cases in Kenya, where you see on the extreme before intervention was mainly what we call as wasteland in Africa. But essentially with the deployment of the right technologies, the interventions in the middle here, it can be turned into very useful land whereby you can see the productivity is several-fold increased. And this one we did for different crops, for Napier, grass growing, for cereals, for pulses, and the results are very interesting. And this case is replicated in Kenya, in Madagascar, in Burundi, and Rwanda, and the results were very consistent across the region. In that with the right deployment of technologies and connecting farmers to the markets, then in that case, we start moving away from theory to putting the incentives on the table for the farmers to respond positively to adopting the existing technologies. What are some of the challenges that we continue facing and that we faced? One is basically on how to harness that, the existing technologies and innovations to respond to community and ecological needs. In this case, we are talking about community and ecological needs, but because many of us, depending on our background, we may be biased to one, either ecological or community needs, but it's important to have that balance. The next challenge was how to scale the heights beyond farm level piloting of proven interventions. And I am happy that in the previous sessions, it was pointed out that we need to move away from piloting to the point whereby we need to get to scale. The other challenge was development of longer term investments that are not pigeonholed in terms of having very specific investments for one sector, but understanding that when we are dealing with farming systems in Africa, they are highly integrated, and it's important that our investments are done on a value chain kind of approach, whereby you look at the need from the communities all the way to how they can be made sustainable. And the last challenge is basically how to develop and promote the use of downscaled weather-based advisories. With the emerging serious implications of climate change, it doesn't matter how much technologies we deploy on the ground, but it's very important that we give the communities specific interventions which are required based on the weather forecast, and that's what we call as weather-based advisories, but which are scaled to the point whereby they are reasonable and they are given within a good lead time. So those are some of the challenges that we continue facing. And therefore the take-home message is that any future investments is basically to focus on exploiting the existing technologies that have been proven to work in other places. The next the issue that we need to put on the table is moving to scale. What can we do so that we don't focus too much on piloting, but bringing to scale some of the interventions the region which have worked. The other one take-home message is in terms of our investments need to be holistic. We need to look at the soils, we need to look at the water issues, we need to look at the markets. And finally, we need to continue investing in interpreting the implications of climate or weather forecast to the point whereby they are made to have a meaning. With those points, I would like to bring my contribution to the end and to thank you most sincerely for listening. I hope it triggers one issue or another that we can take forward. And up to that point, I would like to thank the World Bank, the IDRC, European Union for having supported different institutions that we have used or that have been implementing this project on the ground. Thank you so much, and have a nice morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hezron, for that excellent presentation. And colleagues on the call, like I mentioned, I have a formidable team of tested and proven experts that are going to continuously share their experiences. And I like the intro where you say it's not about terminology, it's about nuanced approaches that are now ready to be scaled to solve for the problem that we have on the continent. Thank you very much for that presentation. Now moving on, we started from Ethiopia, came all the way to Kenya. Now we are progressing our conversation to West Africa. Allow me to introduce our next speaker who will be sharing the experiences from Western Africa, Dr. Momini Savadogo, who is the Executive Director of WASCAL, which is West African Science Service Center on Climate Change and Adapted Land Use. He will be sharing with us the experiences from Western Africa, which might not be very different, but we will be echoing the differences, but also the uniqueness of each of the geographies. Dr. Magoka, would you like to mute? Thank you. He holds a PhD in sustainable land use from Wageningen University and Research, and is also an engineer of rural development. Welcome, Dr. Savadogo, and over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I hope you see my screen and can hear me very well. Okay, great. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone. Mine is to share some experiences we have on managing risk and vulnerability to climate extremes in West Africa. Let me say that I wanted here to bring in the perspective of climate science services provision to different stakeholders to enable them and help develop resilient agriculture in West Africa. So I would like to start with the challenge for West Africa. I think we all are aware of the importance of the climate extremes and populations, livelihood, and also our ecological systems. So 75% of the population are affected by disaster, natural disasters, risk, and hazards. And this is something that is really important. And this is, of course, due to climate change. Drought and floods account for, within that percentage, 80% of the loss of life and 70% of economic loss are directly related to drought and floods. These are very important aspects when you talk about achieving sustainable transformation of agriculture in West Africa, because this is has direct impact and is entering our common and differentiated efforts towards achieving that. So we look at it in the perspective of how better science evidence-based approach can be used for us to devise smart policies, innovations, and practice. And one would, of course, understand that for this, we need a strong international cooperation and partnership. When I talk about international cooperation and partnership, I'm looking at South-South and North-South. And I know that's where I want to congratulate AGRA for organizing this webinar. That gives us all opportunity to share and build basis for more cooperation and partnership. So from our experience, we are looking at 3 integrated priority areas within WASCAP. The first one is on capacity building. The second one, research and innovation. And the third one, climate and environmental services provision. This is to help devise options, sustainable options for adaptation, mitigation, resilience, and looking at the core benefits and smart policies and actions. Let me spend a bit time on the capacity building aspect. We, with our regional and international partners, have been able to set up and establish 17 regional graduate schools on climate change. That's to really help speed up and fill the gap in terms of climate scientists and also experts in the region. So 17 regional graduate schools are out now operating. Among those, we have 10 PhD programs and 7 master programs. And at each of these programs, we also do deliver short trainings to help increase our expertise level in the region. From the 17 regional graduate schools, we have 10 that are directly related to the risk and vulnerability to climate extremes. And these are, for instance, we have a master program in Burkina Faso on climate change and informatics. This is training experts on handling data, collecting, processing, checking, and helping in all modeling systems. We have also another one on managing science policy interface, which is directly linked to IPBS. This is to support IPBS processes and giving experts that are really tailored and customized for our region and internationally. Then we have 10 PhD programs, all related, one specifically on disaster risk management, and then others are related to climate change economics, education, land use, agriculture, water resources, biodiversity, and energy. All those are key important sectors where relating to climate change, it can help us really go and help our transformation of sustainable agriculture in the region. So in terms of research of innovation, we have 4 main priority teams. One of it, of course, is risk vulnerability in climate extremes. I will not spend time too much on this, but just to let you know how we work. We have an observation network. These observation networks allow us with scientists with data management unit to devise integrated climate services. Specific deliverables, for example, are catalog extreme precipitation events that help really inform the different stakeholders, wiki of list and definition of key indicators of flood, drought risk levels, and success stories at risk management level, model-based high-resolution maps of projected extremes. This helps really at local, national, and regional level with different stakeholders. And then platform and dialogue forums for timely and updated information provision to farmers. When you look at, for example, at regional observation networks, we have 3 permanent sites that are sub-catchment across the sub-region of West Africa. Since 2012, we have been recording permanently 27 essential variables, using 6 categories of devices. These are automatically collected information, automatic weather station, automatic hydro sensors, and other devices. Every 10 minutes are collecting data, storing, processing through our data management unit. And this is key because in area, for us to have sustainable transformation of agriculture, we need a series of data, integrated meteorological data, hydrological data, other environmental data, and socioeconomic data. Combining them together gives us that strength to have very good modeling systems and also adapted and tailored devices we can use to advise our stakeholders and our farmers. Here I'm giving you one example of vulnerability index that have been used to produce regional maps. These maps are also available at national and local level to guide the different stakeholders. So we do also some integrated prediction models. This also to help us anticipate on some of these extremes. For instance, this is based on the scenarios, 1.5 degree, 2 degrees of UNFCCC. It come to our understanding very clearly that then we have at risk of losing 10 or 50% of our river basins irrigation potentials. Although we all know that that irrigation potential is very key to sustaining our agriculture in the region. So it helps us anticipate on how we can devise options to protect the river basins, and also how we can find other alternative options in terms of, for example, energy provision. If we know all that hydroelectricity is playing key role in West Africa, and we need to find other options around it. Then we do also that we have services for smart agriculture based on ecosystem-based adaptation approaches. These are direct advisory services we are providing to farmers using phones, apps developed, and we are using here local languages to make sure that they are understanding and give them opportunity also to ask questions to help them go into adaptive management of their farms. This helps them, of course, prevent have information right on time, and then have appropriate decisions on the farm management. This helped really in adaptive management and this context. And then we use e-platform for other stakeholders in terms of helping them to get more information on the situation. What I want us to have in mind is that first, the importance of science services to be effectively influencing policies and practices. This requires a co-development approach as we are using for the services provision and advisory to farmers. We have to co-develop with them so that we feed in their local perspective and then combine with our scientific perspective to be effective in influence policies and practices. We need also local timely agroclimatic advisory services. This is something we have tested and we see how effective it is. But also we need long-term and medium-term predictions for us to anticipate in looking and identifying some alternatives and options to cope with it. And then I would like to stress here the importance of international cooperation and partnership in tackling all these issues. You can't do it alone. You need partnerships. And we really laud this partnership with AGRA, and we value ourselves for further cooperation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Momini. I know you had a lot to share, but you tried to squeeze all of it in a few minutes. But thank you for bringing that knowledge to this conversation. Colleagues online, we are seeing your questions and we will be coming to them shortly. So please keep posting your comments. And like we said in the last webinar, we are looking for solutions. We are not looking for problems. We know the problems that the continent has, but collaboratively, we do have the solutions to the problem we have. So yes, these are the problems we have to embrace, and this panel and the audience we have online are here to present some of the possible solutions that we should be looking at. So that said, allow me to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Charles Karangwa, who is the regional lead for forests, landscapes, and livelihoods program for Africa at the International Union for Conservation of Nature. He also recently joined the COP26 high-level champion team. And probably the challenge you will be having is to see how do we integrate all these. You know, we have one side, technologies are available. The other side, we have the solutions that are ready for scale. Where is the role for government and private sector in ensuring these things go to scale while ensuring that we stay resilient and sustainable? Welcome to the conversation, Mr. Karangwa. Your 8 minutes starts now.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share, because for some of the big questions, the interconnection between governments, private sector, but also all still focusing on the same question: how do we achieve sustainable food security, which is the major challenge that we are facing, but also secure, of course, the future of the generation. And allow me to focus these few slides and my 8 minutes on the issue around land restoration and how the continent is looking at it. And I will bring in, of course, the perspective of private sector, but also the government. And then,
Charles, please put your presentation on full scale mode.
I thought I did.
Not yet. We can see it, but we can see the slides as well on the side.
So is it on the presentation mode now?
Not yet, but you can go ahead as you do that in the interest.
Okay, I will start sharing again. Maybe it's okay. Please confirm if it's okay.
Still the same, but I think go ahead. Just go ahead, Charles.
Okay, thanks. So, as I said again, the question I have on the screen is can we restore our land capital to ensure the future of agriculture in Africa? And I want to just speak to a couple of things as we discuss. The first one is with the landscape we source or where we source our food and other things be the same as productive in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years. So I just discovered the problem, moderator. So I have double screen. That's what was, I think, creating challenges. So if you can't see my screen, my slides changing, please let me know. I don't want to mess up the presentation. Are the slides changing?
Not yet, but please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had posed the question here: will the landscape we source be as productive in 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years? And I want to pose a couple of key statements from the research. By 2050, land degradation and climate change together are predicted to reduce total crop yields in Africa. And very soon, in the next 4 years, by 2025, some of the countries even expected the reduction in the production up to 60% because of climate and land degradation, which affects the whole soil availability and soil quality. So crop net revenues could fall by as much as 90% by 2100, with small-scale farmers mostly being the most affected. And I can also talk about the issue around the crop run in Africa, which is actually facing a huge threat, and up to 60% of this is really affected. And it's affecting our bigger economy indicators and numbers on the continent, losing nearly 65 billion each year because of just land degradation and land health kind of loss. But there's a great opportunity here. The continent in Africa have, from 2015, decided as a continent to restore 100 million hectares. And from the research IUCN have been doing in many countries, 80% of the 100 million we are talking about is on farmland. So it's basically owned by smallholder farmers, and it's mostly available and have a potential of being a kind of catalytic change, both economically, but also from livelihoods point of view. And nearly 32 countries in Africa. I wish my presentation could be seen because I put a very good numbers here. I need to change this.
Maybe you can click on the slide you want from the sidebar and see if it will come on. Alternatively, you try and pull it down and we can pull it up. Yeah, now it's changing. Very good.
Fantastic.
Continue doing that.
Fantastic, thanks.
Yeah.
Apologies for the technology issues.
No problem.
So, yeah, this is a great opportunity that we need to build on as we talk about how do we achieve sustainable agriculture.
But now, Charles, your audio is a bit low. You want to come closer to your microphone? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any better?
Much better.
Fantastic. So, yeah, I was saying that this is a great opportunity we have as a continent to leverage on this Pan-African ambition of restoring 100 million hectares by 2030, and which, by the way, 80% of this is on smallholder farmland. So which means actually the number now has gone even beyond 100 million. We are talking about 127 million as of today, with 32 countries that made these commitments. And as I said, 80% of this is owned by smallholder farmers in Africa and needs to be restored. There's no secret and no magic bullet point here we are talking about. We're talking about improving land health, biodiverse soils and landscapes. And these actually have a huge incentives when it comes to how governments look at this. It has incentives in terms of enabling public policies. It needs a kind of biodiversity-friendly supply chains, but also it needs responsible finance and investments. I was following the pre-UN Food Summit, and I don't know, I would encourage you to look at Professor Sasha's great points that actually there is a huge imbalance when it comes to investments in agriculture, which is totally driving unsustainable farming. And I do hope that sustainable finance can actually play a role in bringing that solution. But also this land health issue, which comes again at the center of this discussion, it has a human potential. I mean, it is profitable and resilient farming. It also brings healthy diets and food for people. So this is quite important. And practice, I mean, my previous speakers have already outlined to many examples in terms of agroecological approaches, sustainable landscape governance, etc. And you are creating many benefits in terms of what you are getting. And this speaks quite a lot in terms of actually what exactly potential benefits are you looking at when you invest in restoration and sustainable land management? You are talking about a huge climate benefits of reducing 10% of human-induced carbon emissions. This is a huge and saving a lot of money in billions of US dollars globally. And in Africa alone, saving quite significant trillions of billions of US dollars. It's, again, as I said, there is already a lot of research, and this is already known that if you invest $1 in land restoration, in sustainable land management, you get between $5 to $10 back in return. And it's not a secret. We saw already previous presentation from our colleagues in Ethiopia and what work is happening in Kenya. But beyond that, we are actually providing security of the supply chain. And my previous colleague talks about the connection between smallholder and the market system. So, but these supply chains needs to be sustainable. And the only way to be sustainable is to increase resilience of our landscapes and restore the degraded lands, especially farmlands. But also there's a whole social justice here. You are engaging people. You are making farmers center of the change. You are empowering them, and you are creating livelihoods of millions of people. And again, as I said, it's not a secret. There's no magic bullet. These are things that have been happening. We just need to take them to scale. So regenerative agriculture, that brings too many benefits, and the return on investments is quite a potential in land restoration on this continent. As I said, farmer-managed natural regeneration can reverse millions of degraded lands. We have many examples in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in the Sahel region, but also in Malawi and other countries, the other parts of the continent. So how do we scale these up? What do we need to really take these practices, we know they work, to scale? And what are we not getting wrong? Are they policies? Is it finance? So those are the kind of nuts that needs to be cracked in this conversation. How do we take these best practices to scale? And some of the examples of what IUCN is doing, this is a project in Rwanda, which is working on sustainable land management in terms of the whole catchment restoration. Through this project, within the last 2 years, it was possible to reverse and put under restoration nearly 3,000 hectares. And this, we engaged about 11,000 people, creating these jobs for about at least 6 to 7 months continuously. Communities were involved in the village land use action planning that helped them identify these problems, combining access to finance using their informal savings schemes, but also managing rainwater harvesting to make sure that that water is sustainably used and reduce also the whole soil erosion issues. These are some of the examples in terms of how do we take this to scale. But I think as I finish and around my 8 minutes, there's a couple of considerations that we need to look at as a continent. And I like the work of AGRA, because AGRA is a Pan-African organization working in multiple countries. And I think linking landscape restoration and sustainable agriculture targets will help cutting actually the whole issue around degrading lands on the continent. Breaking silos between Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Environment, Ministry of different technical ministries is very important. This brings actually that holistic way to embrace these questions. And I think the second consideration is there is a need for a cross-sectoral approach to ensure coordinated efforts. And this is we have smallholder farmers in many countries and small initiatives, but taking this to scale require a very intentional coordinated efforts. And we can achieve this, it's very possible. The third personal consideration, I think there's a need to rethink agricultural subsidies in Africa, to redirect this into sustainable agriculture, which can offer a huge cut in funding gaps. Again, we can continue talking about funding gaps and problem of finance, but I think until we have rethought, and this is the kind of work that AGRA has been investing in, looking at ag finance in the continent, rethinking these subsidies will help us quite a lot. Finally, embracing the landscape approach, which I had talked about, does not only bring a farmer-centered approach that can be scaled up to many landscapes, but also helps connecting value chain players in the market systems, which then brings that transformational action within the continent. And finally, let's stop NATO. NATO is the no action talking only. And I think you have been talking a lot. There's a lot of very good examples. What if we take them and scale them up and embrace action for the next 10 years, at least to achieve these changes? Thank you very much for your attention. And sorry for the technology.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karangwa. I think I like your call to action, which is stop NATO. And I do like the fact that you have put yourself on the forefront of ensuring that we only see action and not more talking and talking as our farmers and our people go hungry every single day without a meal. Thanks a lot for those live examples. And I think the chat is ablaze with questions around how this can actually be landed, because the audience does agree that collaborations are the way to go, partnerships are the way to go, but how do we actually move this from this dialogue to actually implementing these at scale across the continent? So speaking to some of that knowledge as well, allow me to introduce, we are coming very close to the final presenters, but we would love to hear from Mr. Tom Owino, who's a lecturer, Department of Crops, Horticulture and Soil, Egerton University. He brings as well experience and expertise in regenerative and inclusive food systems. He's an agronomist himself and an administrator, but also has been leading the innovations for sustainable and profitable intensification of smallholder dairy, a project in Kenya. So we'll be keen to hear from his examples through that project. Welcome, Tom Owino. Tom, are you on mute? So moving fast, we will probably come back to Tom. Allow me to move to our next presenter, who is also one of our funders, none other than Mr. Nico Hassan, who is the program manager for agricultural livelihoods at IKEA Foundation. The focus of this grant making, which is of course, as we all know, are not for profit, is to bring inclusive, circular and regenerative agriculture that contributes to affordable and better livelihoods that reduce poverty on the planet. He himself is a development expert specializing in food and nutrition security, as well as agricultural value chain development. Nico, as we call you, you bring a lot of experience, not only on the continent, but globally. And I think you bring a new dimension, which is really about nutrition. We are very keen on understanding, the nexus between food security, nutrition, sustainability, resilience, but also affordability. Please welcome to the dialogue to share with us your experiences and also some solutions on how we can collectively make this happen. Welcome, Nico.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me try to share my screen as well. Aggie, is that working?
Yes, it is. If you put it on full screen, we'll be good to go.
Is it going to a presentation mode now?
Not yet. You're almost there. If you click that button.
Yeah.
Correct.
This should work. Okay. Let me try to get something out of the way. Okay. Yes, thank you. And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And thanks to AGRA for having me as a panelist today, of course. As Aggie said, at the IKEA Foundation, one of our core priorities is to ensure a transition to a cleaner, greener, and more sustainable planet. We believe that this will be possible only if all people are given an opportunity to participate in this transition and to benefit from it. I've been asked to reflect a bit as a philanthropic funder on policy and investment needs for sustainable and resilient farming systems. But before I go there, allow me a bit to introduce a bit about who we are as IKEA Foundation and what we do in the agriculture space. Our starting point is a bit the complex world of a smallholder farmer. We all know that smallholder farmers across the world often are confronted in complex systems and face poverty. And what makes it even worse for them is the situation is that ongoing practices along with climate change continue to degrade the ecosystems, and we've heard this before, I think. Am I sharing my full screen, or am I sharing?
Yes, you are sharing your screen. You need to move it. Yeah, just click on slide 2. Then yeah, correct.
Okay.
There.
Is slide 2 visible now? Yeah.
Yeah, you're on slide 2 and slide 3 now. You might want to go to slide 3. You can go to slide 3.
Let me try to share again, otherwise doesn't always work as we like it.
I know.
Is that better?
Yeah, way better.
Okay. So we are, as we heard other speakers say as well, we are facing a serious problem that we try to contribute to also as a philanthropic funder. And for us at IKEA Foundation, that picture is clear. We want to work with the planet, not against it. And we want to harness the power of regenerative agriculture for our Earth, which is critical to overcome the biggest challenges that we are facing at the moment: a degrading environment, loss of biodiversity, and climate change. Because we can't even think about improving livelihoods if we can't address these core elements. And we believe that regenerative agriculture will lead to healthy soils that are capable of producing high quality, nutrient-dense food, enough for everybody on this planet. And as we heard also in previous speakers, it also improves rather than degrades the ecosystem. It supports productive farms and healthy communities, which helps safeguard farmers' livelihoods so they can grow the food we need now and in the future. And we support building stronger local and circular food systems to keep valuable natural resources, minerals, and nutrients in the loop. Circular agribusinesses not only provide excellent environmental solutions, but they also create jobs and reduce countries' dependencies on import. And we believe in empowering farmers to drive these solutions, be at the forefront of a global regenerative revolution by making them an integral part of policy discussions. They can help build the systems of products and services that are locally relevant and reduce dependency on patented and/or chemical inputs. And we believe that in developing a better understanding for a movement away from low cost towards true cost of food, cheap food is expensive for people and the planet. It keeps us locked into an unsustainable food system that costs the global economy significant amounts of money. The current price of food does not factor in the health bill generated for unhealthy diets or the cost of land degradation and biodiversity loss. So how do we think as a funder that we can achieve this? No more than ever, we need a collaboration between farmers, consumers, funders, governments, businesses, and NGOs to work together to achieve the food system change necessary for people and planet to thrive. And we see key actors in this that have a role to play in accelerating a transition to a sustainable and regenerative food system. First and foremost, possibly governments, who should provide incentives to mainstream nature-positive agriculture. And we need to make changes in business models and measures of success to align long-term business profitability with conservation of biodiversity and ecosystems. But also financial institutions must integrate nature-related considerations into their decision-making and investments. We think that civil society needs to continue their critical role to raise awareness and build a movement towards nutritious diets, a healthy environment, and support for farmers who practice regenerative agriculture. And last but definitely not least, grassroots groups of farmers, indigenous people, women, and local agribusinesses require support to generate strong evidence and business cases for farming models that unite social, ecological, and economic well-being. And we've seen a few of these already this afternoon. Let me give some examples. Also, apologies, this goes a bit slower than I was hoping for. Of what we are funding, and without wanting to disqualify work of any of the partners that we are funding and who are not mentioned in this slide, some of examples. For instance, we are working with projects on the ground to demonstrate to farmers, businesses, and local governments that a transition to regenerative is possible, and that is not only deliver on food security, environmental protection, and biodiversity altogether. For instance, we are working in East Africa with AGRA, with Kilimo Trust, with Practical Actions and others to diversify production systems, to reduce cropping risk, to manage resources better, and deliver a more diverse food basket. But we're also working on understanding what this means for extension systems, last mile distribution systems, and sourcing systems. Business models are often built around expensive external inputs. How do these look like in a regenerative or a circular system? And for instance, what are opportunities for youth and women in these diversified systems? Does this give a new inspiration for youth to remain active in agriculture? Does it empower women to have more control and voice? We're also working, for instance, with Wageningen University and Research, together in partnerships with local universities in the East African countries, to take a leading role in stimulating innovation and guide such processes, and to guide also dialogue between research, implementers, and local governments on how this can be embraced and how this can be upscaled. And to influence policy more and more and more, we need a growing group of believers and influencers. And that's why we're supporting also a number of networking organizations that can facilitate local networks on the ground to learn and share together and seek dialogue with local stakeholders. And to look at how do we then also influence policy, we are working with not only governments, but also with finance providers and benchmark setters on really looking at what kind of policy needs to be changed, what kind of policy needs to be facilitated. For instance, we're working with Aceli Africa, who are working with financial institutions to incorporate better and more financial criteria that look at both livelihoods and the planet. To summarize this, what we think is needed in terms of investments is support, especially to local innovation. Not only financial support, but paving the way for successful scaling through policy and investments. More resources for research to get better localized results and recommendations, but also to build up more capacity and strengthen the interface between research, practice, and policy, and strengthen coalitions and movements to be more inclusive and representative to all actors in the food systems. In terms of policy, we believe more is needed to favor nature-based approaches, such as agroecology, regenerative, circular, and create the right incentives for this, or to reduce disincentives that favor negative approaches, to stimulate true cost accounting for the production and trading of food that embrace aspects like fair pay to farmers, but also that integrate biodiversity and environmental impacts in their pricing. Businesses and investors should embrace performance accounting that use, for instance, ESG criteria and that have positive contributions to biodiversity as guiding principles, and finance providers should provide incentives to those SMEs that show positive behavior towards nature positive approaches. So thank you very much. That was a highlight of a bit about what we do, what we believe in. And thanks for the opportunity again to give us some speaking time.
Thank you very much, Nico, for that very, very well elaborated presentation. And thank you again for reiterating the need for together, and for also reaffirming that you work with the planet and not against it. And I guess that echoes really the thinking and the framing of this particular webinar. Ladies and gentlemen on the call, again, your questions are coming through. We will be picking out specifically the ones that are offering solutions. The comments and notes that are being shared are being incorporated into this dialogue, and we will be speaking to some of them later. But ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our final and last speaker tonight, who brings with him a lot of expertise as well, Dr. Dave Watson. Dave, I don't see you on camera. Please, I hope you can hear me. I know he's been having connection challenges, but Dr. Dave Watson is the Senior Livelihoods Advisor at the Regional Food Trade and Resilience Committee for FCDO, for those of you that know FCDO. He's also seconded to AGRA and supporting the Africa Food Trade and Resilience Program. He's an advisor working for the UK government's foreign FCDO office, but also a development expert specializing as well in food and nutrition security and agriculture value chain development. Dave, you have the floor. We'll give you 10 minutes as our last speaker, and hoping that you will pull everything together as we wrap up the webinar. Thank you, and over to you.
Excellent, and thank you for inviting me. Just to check, do I have control over these slides, or does somebody else?
Yes, you do. You do.
Oh, cool. Okay, I'll start to use the time properly. Yeah, just to kind of start with a kind of an overview of where the kind of big kind of picture thinking is, and there's lots of different ways of cutting this cake. This is Beni, 2019, his critique of the food system. As far as we're concerned, whoops, it's not changing.
Okay.
Oh yes, it is, but it's very slow. It basically boils down to kind of key things such as food security and the needs out of the food system for food security, and particularly that nutritional security and health. Nico was talking about diets. The other dimension, social justice, livelihoods, a fair livelihood for farmers, which is easier said than done. And last but certainly not least, the focus on natural resources, agrobiodiversity, broader biodiversity, and natural resources such as water, soil fertility, carbon, etc., etc. These are the kind of four things that are really kind of big on the international agenda, and also incredibly relevant for Africa. I've got a very unresponsive key here, but let's see how we go. You'll probably get everything all at once, like London buses. Key drivers of change. Oh, no, it's not. It's not coming. It's coming very slowly. Increased population growth. I mean, Africa is the center of kind of population growth. Virtually all the new population growth is going to occur in Africa over the next 10, 20, 30 years. We've got massive urbanization, which is, again, one of the fastest, if not the fastest, level of urbanization across the globe. We've got climate change. And if my last one comes up, we've got financialization of the food system. And I guess the biggest point of that would be speculative land grab within Africa. So some of the key considerations for Africa that are being debated more broadly within the international community, the donor community, particularly for Africa, is this focus on food production and food security. We either have too little or the wrong sort, or too much, which is evolving in Africa as well. So food security is a is a key issue. We've got climate adaptation, resilience, and to some extent mitigation. As far as Africa is concerned, Africa is exposed to some of the greatest expected shocks within climate change, and has in overall the least capacity to deal with it. And then we've got habitat and species loss and the need to reduce habitat and species loss. That's just a kind of an overview of kind of forest and forest deforestation in sub-Saharan Africa, which is a major concern. That's just one example of habitat and species loss, which is key for Africa. And then it's gone on strike again. Second lot of considerations, and this I was glad that I'm not out of sync. A lot of our previous speakers have talked about the need for increased soil fertility, both synthetic and natural sources of fertilizer, whether that's manure or bioproducts. A lot of soils across the world are quite fertile, particularly kind of phosphate, high phosphate content, because they've had lots of synthetic fertilizers. But in Africa, it's incredibly kind of thin in the ground, or most places. To reverse nutrient mining, to increase biomass production, to reduce and reverse soil erosion. And we've seen an awful lot of that, heard a lot about that today, which is absolutely key. There's an imperative to reduce food loss and food waste. In Africa, it's more important, I think, on the kind of food loss side. We're still losing tons of food, literally tons of food in the food systems, both long and short chain food systems, and to improve diets and health. To do this from increasing diversity of a farm level production to deliver nutrient-rich diets, and also to try and move away from the increasing level of consumption of ultra-processed foods, particularly in urban areas. And last but not least, and this is probably the hardest nut to crack, increased food system equity, fair remuneration for farmers. That's an issue across the world. And in Africa per se, farmers are so small that giving them a fair price and generating a kind of an equitable livelihood is a massive challenge. I've got there, I mean, Chelations quite stealthily kind of pulled together some of the key contenders within this kind of alternative food system space. And we've heard quite a lot about regenerative agriculture, agroecology, but there are many other contenders for this crown. I think we're covering some of the main ones. This is something that Steiner pulled together. Many others have done the same thing. I'm trying to get to my next slide. There's a good transatlantic lag here. I don't know whether anyone else can move it on for me. Okay, so which way forward? There's a huge investment in kind of, I guess, reforming to some extent or amending the industrial system through techno fixes. There's a lot of investment going into climate smart agriculture, into data intensive agriculture, et cetera, and I think they have a role in Africa as well as across the rest of the world in their niches. There are financial fixes. Investments are always seen as, we don't have money. That's why we can't do the things that we need. And I think financial fixes can go quite a long way as well, but not fix everything. And trade fixes, I think there are massive opportunities for both global exports out of Africa, but particularly, and this is one of the things that I'm working with AGRA on at the moment, there's an awful lot of opportunity through regional food trade and also improving trade systems within the countries themselves. We'll move on to the next one in a second. Hopefully I don't get time penalties for this. organic. Organic is big across the world, but it's still only niche. In Europe, it's about 8.5, but growing. Denmark is very strong on organic. Austria is about 25%. A quarter of the land is organic, under organic production. The EU new policy is supposedly heading in this direction. How that will pan out is a different matter. It's likely to create even greater demand for organic produce coming out of Africa, and it's been strongly promoted by the FAO and NGOs on the ground in Africa, and there are lots of good examples of that. Agroecological, yeah, I think we need to give that a fair kind of hearing, so to speak. It's promoted by FAO in Africa. In South America, it's adopted as a national model in some countries, like Ecuador, Bolivia, and parts states within Brazil. Not obviously not the maize and soy belt areas, soybean areas. And then there's regenerative, and in some respects, if you go back to Ken Giller's recollection of regenerative, he suggested, yeah, it's a kind of a rehash of a lot of existing technologies, some of them very well proven and some not so much. So there's not really that much new, but it's something that the private sector is really, really keen on. And it's something that I think has significant or has opportunity within Africa to move forward. And my last, and I see Aggie's there, so my last little point there, oh, and it's gone. My last point anyway is, and I think it really kind of resonates with what Chelations said. Africa is incredibly heterogeneous. There's probably a real future for more industrial, very techno-focused agriculture. There's also probably good niches for agroecological, regenerative, and also organic, and probably other approaches. There are probably going to be other approaches that evolve over the next kind of 5-10 years. So in my mind, it's about how we influence the planning, the evolution of how that very heterogeneous hybrid of options comes together, really to kind of hit all the buttons that we need to hit. And there are many, many of those. It's not just, like I say, it's not just about resource use, biodiversity, healthy diets, but meeting the food needs. I mean, the food security need is growing, not exponentially, but it's a major issue. And it's fine to talk about how we kind of take the pressure out of the system. And I think that's important where we can, but we've still got that underlying kind of need to feed a growing and quickly growing population within, particularly within Africa. So it's getting that balance and getting it right. I think that's the difficult bit. And that's all I had to say, really. Thanks, Aggie. I hope it came across loud and clear.
Yes, very, very loud and clear. I love the passion. I love, the delivery of the message. Thank you very much, Dave Watson, for that excellent presentation. Now, we had lost Tom Owino earlier on due to some tech hitch, but he's back. And I think in the interest of time, we will give him a few minutes. Tom Owino, please, maybe you could quickly go through some of the quick insights you have. Then Chelations will come and help us pull all of this together with the comments that are coming in the chat. Very, very exciting comments coming in the chat. Tom Owino, would you please put your camera on? I had introduced you earlier, but as you prepare your slide, I will just remind our audience that you're the lecturer, Department of Crops, Horticulture and Soil at Egerton University. You're a team member and deputy director of Nakuru Living Land under the Regenerative and Inclusive Food Systems Project. You are an agronomist and a project administrator for ISPID, a project that is in Kenya working on sustainable and profitable intensification of smallholder dairy. Please have the floor. If you can do this in 6 minutes, that will be excellent, because we've already overrun our time, unfortunately, but the discussions are very, very interesting discussions. Over to you, Mr. Owino.
Thank you, Aggie. Can you hear me?
Yes, but we can't see you.
Okay. My name is Tom
yes,
Owino.
now I can see you.
Yeah.
Now I can see you.
I work for Egerton University, and currently we are on a project that is supported by a CARE Foundation in collaboration with Wageningen University and Egerton University, working towards the establishment of living labs in Nakuru. And we have got our counterparts who are also in Uganda and Ethiopia. Living lab is not a very common terminology, but people can talk about innovation platforms or farmer field schools and so on and so forth to explain the same thing. But it is living labs as the one that we have in Nakuru, which was recently launched just about 10 days ago, is working towards regenerative and inclusive food systems in Eastern Africa with our counterparts in Ethiopia, that is Bahir University in Ethiopia and Muni University in Uganda. And Egerton is contributing towards the Kenyan initiative. So a living lab is simply a place where people come, different actors come so that they can be able to work together, co-create innovations and technologies that are for the benefits of the farming community. It is a place also where people come, others are like the enablers, the doers, and the thinkers. So many doers, the doers like the farmers have got a lot of reservoir of knowledge in terms of indigenous technical knowledge that needs to be put in perspective. So the scientists bring their scientific thinking into this with the help of enablers who are like the government institutions that are on policy, people who are in areas of communication, people who are in areas of environment, to be able to help in the production systems. So in Nakuru, we did a lot, some work, scoping work to get to know what others do. And we went interviewing about over 40 groups and initiatives. And then we narrowed down into working now with around eight groups, which I'm going to show in a short while. They are in various areas of agricultural systems, like we have got the Wanyororo Dairy, that is in dairy cooperative. They are in the producing milk, and we have gone to them to look at how we can be able to work with them to get to emphasize and put in place regenerative processes that are going to help in restoration of degraded natural resources like soils and the environment as in general. So we are working towards others like Menengai Community Forest Association, who are in their mission is conservation of Menengai forest ecosystem while using the non-timber forest resources like honey and so on and so forth, but still conserving that environment. So we identified some very regenerative and inclusive practices like the environmental ecosystem and the biodiversity restoration in the preservation of the environment. We have got the Hot Spring Youth Self-Help Group that is in aquaculture, and their mission is to conserve the hot spring catchment through forestation and enhanced food security in fish aquaculture systems. One of the issues that they have highlighted is the issue of feeds for fish that I'm going to tell you about how we are going to make interventions. We have got Green Vision Self-Help Group that is doing seed potato production in an area in Nakuru. Potato is one of the major value chains or major crops that have been identified as a major value chain, one of the 5 priority value chains in Nakuru. So that is why we have got a lot of interest in potato. We also work with another dairy cooperative society, that is Lare Cooperative Society. These are some of the pictures that we took when we took them for learning journeys, so that they can be able to map out and see what others are doing in other areas, people who are in similar enterprises and similar production systems. We have got Greencom Self-Help Group that is doing waste management by recycling bio-waste to produce organic fertilizers. We have identified their areas of concern and gaps that are there even as they try to make these fertilizers through composting. And that is how now the thinkers in the science from Egerton University and other other players that we associate with will be able to help them so that they can be able to improve on this fertilizer according to the needs of the farmers and people who are in the production. We have got Green Thumb that is doing aquaponics. This is basically a youth group who have got a lot of interest in urban production, in urban fish production, in greenhouse, and those people who have got small sizes of land. And these are the guys we work with. We also have Resect. Resect is working on black soldier fly larvae and trying to introduce farmers and other people in how they can be able to produce feeds, especially the protein-based feeds that can be able to help the farmers reduce the cost of feeding livestock. So they recycle bio-waste, and through the recycling of bio-waste, they have come up with these initiatives that are helping, going to help in a very big way to reduce the costs of production. So some of the lessons that we have learned is that a living lab allows for multi-stakeholder involvement and supportive and innovative approaches for the initiatives. We also have private sector players, especially when we did the launch, who got interested in discussing business models for sustainable growth and for profitability for these groups. People have already approached us, and we are encouraged that this thing is going to work, as we are also bringing a lot of other people on board. The innovation cases have a rich reservoir of indigenous technical knowledge, as I've already said, and we help work together so that we can see what we can be able to upscale for a wider use in the farming landscape. Living Lab can also provide a platform for synergy building among actors. And finally, Living Lab can be a way to take ownership of and guide the regional sustainable development. The Living Lab collaboration and vision are ways to attract international investments to the region. So we are in, we are almost like about 8 months since we started this work. We got the Living Lab established about, launched about 10 days ago. And we hope that we are going to add to the knowledge base that is already available as we use the already developed or established technologies, and we add on to what we are going to also develop together with the farmers in the way of co-creation as we go along. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think we would have missed such a significantly different solution if we hadn't heard from you. Thank you for sharing this. And the audience online is asking, how fast can this be scaled? Is this scalable? You know, how do we collaborate together? Thank you so much for sharing this idea and for joining the movement of collaborators in solving the problem we have. So ladies and gentlemen online, allow me to bring back Dr. Telahun to pull all of these views together as we come to the tail end of our webinar. Again, please hold on with us. We should be wrapping up in not more than 10 minutes from now. Telahun, are you on?
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Agi. The weather in Addis is very bad for asthmatic people. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I enjoyed the discussion. I think it was rich and coming from different angles, and it's really encouraging to hear the best experiences. But I just wanted to expand the discussion by throwing a few questions to colleagues, one question per presenter, brief questions and brief answers. We start with Dr. Gete. Dr. Gete, as you know, there are, systems, agroforestry systems, which have been for decades in the country, even some are much longer. And yet you find poverty in those places. People are still poor, still struggling. So even if we advocate for agroecosystem-based, natural-based systems, those guys are still struggling. So what is going wrong? What do we do with those communities? If you can give us a brief answer, Gate. Are you online?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Thank you, Dr. Tlaun, for really raising this important issue. In the south and the southwest part of Ethiopia, there is a very rich indigenous agroforestry system. But you can see, I think you have seen in my slide, there is a rich green biomass, but there is a very poor heart. And I did it deliberately. I picked that picture deliberately. Poverty in the green. I did quite some investigation there back in 2010 and 2009. And the problem there was, there are a number of issues. One is the market linkage. They produce, but the major beneficiaries are the middle men and the businessmen. Less income goes to the farming community. Second is the technology itself. Like, for instance, this false banana, which we produce, kocho, is a major production there. But the technology they use is very old, rudimentary technology. I think that's where we have to also improve. Third is also the species, the varieties of like fruit trees, coffee, the false banana, and the banana, all are actually low producing species. I think this is also something need to be changed. The fifth is the population growth and the density, which has to be managed, and the processing also.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Hezron and Svadogo. You both mentioned the importance of weather-based advisories and services to farmers for climate risk management, for environmental protection. But as you know, the meteorological density is very thin in the continent. So most of the information which is coming as climate service is rarely accurate. So what do we do? How do we improve really our data set generation? What type of measurement is required to bring really quality data that can really be used to address these climate issues in the continent? So if any one of you, Hezron or Svadogo, if you can come back to us.
Yes, hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Can you hear me? So thank you. Yes, indeed, that is part of the mission of WASCAR. As far as West Africa is concerned, we're trying to complement and replace some of the equipments on the ground so that we have very dense grid of these weather stations in hydro sensors. So we provided 50 automated weather stations already, some of the countries, and we provided 60 automated hydro sensors to them. So we replace progressively and expand the network. We need to continue to do that in partnership with the World Meteorological Organization, so that we have that completed. Meanwhile, of course, we try to use effectively what exists and make sure that we collect data and then manage and process it and make it available for scientists in the region so that can use it in various types of modeling and assessing and giving advisory services to communities.
Thank you very much. I want to go to Charles and Nico.
Maybe I will add one point, Telahun, just 1 minute.
Please, Ezra.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Moumin. What you have said is extremely important. But one other additional point that I would like to bring out is that what the farmers really need is not necessarily in terms of climate information, but climate change adaptation information. And this is the information that guides the farmers on the kind of investments that they need to put in the farm in respect to the climate or weather forecast. And that is where we are missing the biggest opportunity. And that kind of, and the other important thing is the scale at which we do that, because you remember this weather forecast is done from the regional level, then it's brought down to the country specific, then it's the responsibility of the country departments to actually bring down this information to location specific. That means that the response of the farmers depends on the kind of information that is given, how it is downscaled, and when it's given. Because most of this information we give farmers when it's just a day to. They don't have time to make tactical responses on the farming activities. And therefore, one key investment that we need to make as a region is in terms of downscaling what we call as climate change adaptation information. That is going beyond climate change information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Coming to Nico, probably Charles I think has left. Nico, you in your presentation on regenerative agriculture, which is very, very interesting, you mentioned circular agricultural systems, which I think could work in niches, as it was mentioned by Dave Watson. But in Africa, we're operating in a mined system whereby agriculture has been ongoing for years without applying any fertilizer. And there are things you cannot regenerate. Phosphorus, for example, potassium, magnesium, the micronutrient like zinc. So where do you get it in the regenerative agriculture concept? And how do we really employ it? And if you employ really a full-scale adoption, for example, bringing in green manures, a farmer has to lose a season to grow that green manures that can be then recovered and applied to the soil. So there is always that cost. So if you really can comment on this, Nico, I know you know the basics very well. So if you can comment on this.
Yeah, thanks, Dilun, for the question. And I think you're exactly right. A lot of systems have been mined as a result of poor knowledge, as a result of poor practice, as a result of increasing pressure on scarce resources. And I think that's also why we are funding a lot of research and prototyping, as we call them, programs, is to exactly find out these questions. And we know that, and we've learned it, and we see it a lot here in Europe, and that the high intensity external input chemical agriculture, if I may call it like that, is not going to be the answer. Because then we will never come to the net zero that we have to come to in a few decades' time, but also these are ending resources. By the end of this century, if not earlier, phosphorus will be finished, potentially. So we have to also invent how we can use that more circular. And yeah, together with our partners, we're trying to figure this out. Research needs to be focused on that. Practitioners need to be focused on that. I think what also Tom is showing with the living labs, those are excellent opportunities to put those questions forward and together find out what is possible. But also to together define what the ambition level is. Do we want maximum yield at the cost of something that we can no longer restore, or are we happy with maybe a bit less yield in a system that can maintain itself much longer? But what then also are the larger questions around that of how do we then satisfy food security? How do we satisfy farmer incomes? How do we satisfy job requirements? All those kind of things.
Thank you.
It's a complex puzzle.
Yeah. Yes, this is very important. So I fully agree that the high intensity input intensive systems should moderate and we have niches, but also combine really the different options together, which leads toward sustainable, less input intensive systems. I think that would be the way forward. Dave Watson, you talked about agriculture and nutrition, Dave, and we are promoting market-oriented agriculture in most of the systems, most of the investments. So rarely, what people produce is rarely targeting nutrition. So how do we manage these trade-offs? Getting money, because most farmers in Ethiopia, for example, people now grow teff, which is nutrient dense, but they sell it out and they don't consume it because they need money. So how do we balance this agriculture, nutrition, and income in our African settings?
I see you've left the hardest question till the end, Tilhan. I don't mind. Yeah, no, I mean, traditionally, a lot of the more nutritionally dense foods have been grown in the kind of home gardens close to the small holding. And I think in many respects that will continue. I think there is a lot of opportunity to both educate consumers to eat more healthily, but I think probably the biggest challenge, and this is both within Africa and the rest of the globe, it's about creating systems that can produce those nutrient dense and diverse kind of crops at a competitive price that the poorest can actually afford, and also to invest in the supply chains of those, whether they're fruits, vegetables, whatever they happen to be. An awful lot of fruits and vegetables in Africa are lost because lack of storage or poor transportation, and there's a lot that can be done in that area. So it's that kind of really promoting the economic and physical kind of accessibility to that nutrition, as well as working, towards education and promotion of nutritious diets. And also, and I mean, this is where things are going a little bit kind of in a more developed world context, also starting to take a tougher stance on some of the ultra processed kind of foodstuffs, whether it's outright bans or whether it's taxation, or whether, I think Nico was talking about, you incentivize something good and you disincentivize something not so good. So I think there's the scope there as well. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. This is very good. I think, the issue is, up to now, all these debates are unorganized, we were not having platforms to discuss about some of these concepts. And in our last webinar, there was an agreement, I think consensus that, but most of these narratives have a huge communality. So the differences are much lesser than the communalities. So I think this discussion should continue, and it's really a privilege to have you all in the panel and all the participants, active participation. We are looking forward for the next opportunity, and thank you for being available. Back to you, Agi.
Thank you very much, Telahun, and thanks a lot again to our formidable panelists for really sharing the insights and your experiences with us this evening, but most importantly to the audience, as well as to my colleagues and the team that have been trying to put all of this together. We do agree that it is a complex conversation. It is indeed a puzzle, and it takes efforts of men and women on this call and more to indeed rewrite history by making the right choices for planet Earth. So that said, I would like to mention that our next series will be in another 2 weeks. We will be focusing this time on the role of private sector, and we will be bringing the voices of farmers themselves to be able to tell us what kind of incentives do they need to adopt these practices, but also how do they speak to the productivity conversation, profitability conversation, and the resilience conversation. Let us keep the conversations going. Thank you very much for taking time to join us, and au revoir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aggie. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks. Bye. Bye. Bye.